Okay, so I am going to start by introducing a person who needs no introduction. Shannan Moon joined the Nevada County Sheriff's Office as a correctional officer in 1990. She rose through the ranks of the department as the first female sergeant, lieutenant, and captain. She likes to say she grew up in the sheriff's office. But I think it's important to note that she also grew up watching her dad, Jim, work his way up from deputy sheriff to chief of police in Nevada City. Demonstrating her commitment to the community and, of course, to public service, in 2018, Shannan first ran for and won the position of sheriff, coroner, and public administrator. She was reelected in 2022. Please help me welcome Sheriff Moon.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor.
Well, we're going to spend our time today talking about one small sliver of Shannan's very large job, and that's the issue of evacuating Nevada County. So I want to start, Shannan, just by having you describe what is the sheriff's role in evacuation?
It's a huge responsibility, number one. Clearly, as your sheriff, when we have any type of an emergency where we start looking at saving lives, we look at what is best for our community by getting people out of an area that's dangerous. So in California, our legislature, I want to say probably more than 30 years ago, created a penal code section that allows us to close off an area for an emergency. And that's the authority that we have of closing off an area so that we can remove people from a dangerous situation. It allows us to let the folks that need to address that emergency room to be able to get in, room to be able to mitigate whatever emergency it is. We clearly talk a lot about wildfire here in Nevada County and across really all of Northern California, I think, within these last few years. But truly any type of an emergency that would allow us to close off an area, to allow people to safely get out of an area that is deemed to be dangerous, so that we can let the folks, the very important folks that know how to address an emergency in there to be able to mitigate whatever incident it is.
And Shannan, do you operate inside the city limits as well, or are you just in the unincorporated county?
So as your sheriff, every 4 years you vote. It's all of the constituency of a county. So that political jurisdiction of a county votes for the sheriff, whether you live in the city or whether you live in the county. Under California, again, under mutual aid, so we have a fantastic California law enforcement mutual aid system. It allows us to create regions, to create operational areas so that we can use the resources that we have, but clearly we understand agencies across our state don't have the resources at hand, so we ask for mutual aid. So if within a city jurisdiction, if an incident occurs, those police officers within that jurisdiction do have the authority to create an evacuation for their area. They're the first ones on scene. They're the ones with the most information based on their connection with their city services in the city of Grass Valley. In the city of Nevada City, it's going to be that Grass Valley Police Department or Grass Valley Fire Department. In the town of Truckee, it's going to be that Tahoe Truckee Fire Department agency. And then between all of that, you have Consolidated Fire Department, the Tahoe National Forest has firefighters, and then our wonderful partners from CAL FIRE, our state agency, responsibility for those fires. So working in collaboration with those agencies, really being able to get together, figure out what kind of scene do we have, and then making those decisions from the scene, not calling in saying, this is what I want to do, Sheriff, what can we do? We have to be able to make those decisions on the scene with those very important folks that are trained in those situations. So it doesn't matter which jurisdiction you live in Nevada County and also truly across our country. Law enforcement, fire agencies, they're going to show up. They're going to provide whatever they can as that all units responding to emergencies, and then we determine later kind of whose jurisdiction it is for potential long-term situations.
So it's so I should have said this to the audience. Shannan knows this already. We're going to have kind of three segments here. The first one is the sheriff's office responsibility. The second one is how that interacts with other agencies, and then the third one is what that looks like on the ground. So that's kind of where we're going, and of course we'll open it up for questions as well. So then, structurally, it's possible if I'm in Grass Valley and there's an evacuation that is called that the Grass Valley Police Department would start, and then you guys would come in and take over depending on the severity of the situation.
Correct. In California, our mutual aid system is the agency that has jurisdiction, so that's literally where you're standing, right? Where you're standing determines that jurisdiction. That agency will start. Again, in Nevada County, it's an all-call. Everybody shows up. If we deplete the resources with the police department and the sheriff's office, I'm our area coordinator for mutual aid. I would then call for mutual aid from our region. We're in Region 4 for California Mutual Aid for law enforcement, 11 counties. So out of those 11 counties, we're at the north end, Sacramento, Calaveras, Yolo, 11 counties would come together and put an all-call for their officers and say, Nevada County needs some help. Get going up to Nevada County because we've depleted the resources from the police department. We've depleted the resources from the sheriff's office. Now we need mutual aid coming in. And again, in California, I'm one of 58 sheriffs. Any sheriff that I called, I would say, I need some help. They'd send whatever they had. And we do the same. We show up for other agencies because we understand there's never going to be enough staff when some of these emergencies happen. So that's what the mutual aid agreements within California are. It's part of the government code. It's part of the governor's office, the California Office of Emergency Services. They have a wonderful website, and they talk about how this mutual aid system works.
And is there an expectation if you are not on duty that day, if you're a sheriff from another county and happen to be vacationing here, or a retired sheriff, that if there is an evacuation, you go in and help?
Yeah, in California, our peace officers are peace officers 24/7, 365 days out of the year. We're sworn into a position, and those duties don't have a day off. Clearly when we're on vacation and we're doing those things, we might not have the equipment, the safety gear and those things, but we definitely would help if it was a major incident. When we've had major incidences outside of fires, the response from mutual aid, we call it a automatic roll, which sometimes you get that many resources coming, sometimes it's difficult as an incident commander to try to deploy those resources efficiently. So a lot of that comes through that training, through that collaboration with our staff, with all the other agencies that work in our area.
So let's take a step back and talk about some of those planning. I'm hoping everyone here knows their evacuation zone, or at least where to find it. But a lot of planning has gone into the evacuation of Nevada County. Can you talk about, besides that zone map, what you all have done, what you see? Is there a master plan? Is there a bunch of small plans? What does it look like?
I will tell you definitely in the last 5 years, because I can say I've been in that sheriff's role for 5 years, the amount of priority that we've placed on our office for response to emergency has increased incredibly. Prior to becoming the sheriff, as a captain, and with my partner who was a lieutenant at the time, we were the incident commanders on the McCourtney-Lobo fire. Was anybody affected from the McCourtney-Lobo fire here? We had a little bit of a difficulty back then getting the communication out and the notices out for our community. We were responding at midnight. It was a wind-driven event that happened in the middle of the night. McCourtney fire was the first fire. We didn't even know about Lobo until we got a call from the fire department that said, hey, Lobo's going. And fire agencies across the state were already using their resources. So it's very difficult to bring resources in when everybody in California is fighting fire.
And I'm going to interrupt just for those of you that weren't involved or don't remember. This was 2018, and the fire was right near the fairground. So go ahead.
Yeah. So having that discussion with my lieutenant at the time, he pulls over off to the side of the road, gets on his phone to put out a code red to the community. in a little tiny screen, and today I wouldn't even be able to do it with my glasses. And so how do we evolve? How do we do an after-action report after that and say, how can we do this better? We need more people outside of the incident to be able to do some of those very quick communication send-outs, because the more information you know, the safer you're going to be, and the faster you get that information, the safer you're going to be. So in discussions with our partners at the County Office of Emergency Services, which is not the Sheriff's Office, we're two separate different departments. We had those discussions. It's very difficult to find a dedicated staff member to be able to do that 24/7. We work 24/7, so for us, we were like, we need help with this. So it evolved into us having a person assigned into the Office of Emergency Services. So today I have a lieutenant in that position, 24/7. When we have an incident, he typically knows how the fires get going before I do. How he does that, I think he's automatically just connected to his phone more than I am. But he's able to immediately support the incident commanders on our scenes to be able to get that information out as fast as we can. And it's that fast, consistent messaging is definitely one of the priorities and the keys across the country when we see after-action reports, is how can we do this better? Get the information out faster, be more consistent with that information, and get it out in several different layers. So it's not just a piece of technology. We understand not everybody gets the technology of using a phone or internet. We live in a rural environment. Not very many people have stable connection to the internet. So how else do we get that information out? We have to partner with our media. Our media is critical in helping us get that information out fast. So that's with our wonderful partners at UBNet, our partners at KNCO, at the Union, at KVMR, all of those folks being able to put out the same message that we put out on those platforms. So it's not different. It's not someone puts something out and it's a consistent message. It's updated regularly based off of the current conditions at the scene, so that we can provide the direction of where that fire's headed based on all those decisions that we make on when do we evacuate and how big are our evacuation zones.
So I want to go back to the plans for a minute, and let me correct myself. It's 2017. I should have used my glasses to look at my small notes before relying on my memory. But let's talk about the plan. So, like you said, you've done a whole lot more planning in the last 5 years. Do those get reviewed outside of the sheriff's office? Like, do they go to the state OES, or is that something, it's very dynamic, right? Is that something that is done largely in your office and situationally?
It's basically situationally. It's very difficult to take an incident and prepare for a black and white incident and say, this is going to happen, this is how we handle it. Because of the complexities of all the different things that are changing instantly. Population, how populated is an area. Sometimes it's populated, sometimes we get new development, and all of a sudden our population increases. So we're going to have more potential of folks that are evacuating. I think the biggest complexity is our climate and our weather. Those things are changing every single day. But in the incident, if it is a fire, where is that headed? So the very first thing that happens when an incident happens is the first person in our unit that responds, they're the incident commander. Doesn't matter what rank you are, doesn't matter anything. So we practice that on every single call for service. Every call for service in our county, our deputy sheriffs are the incident commander for their call. And they determine very quickly, based on whether it's a crime call or an emergency call, what other resources do they need. So that's a constant training for that staff. And they have to be able to make decisions outside of someone telling them what to do. So that's why I say when we have deputy sheriffs and police officers in our community and fire officers in our community, they truly have the confidence to be able to make decisions based on the conditions that they have at the time.
So I want to ask some questions about the incident commander then and their actual authority. So are they the ones ultimately that determine whether there will be an evacuation watch or a warning, or does someone else, an evacuation?
There's only 3 orders. So there's a order for evacuation, which means you must leave. There's a warning, evacuation warning, which is be ready, and then there's a shelter in place. Those are the only 3 things you're going to hear from law enforcement on a direction during an evacuation. An order to get out, a warning to be ready, and a shelter in place, stay inside. And the decision that is made to evacuate is made in unified command with the other agencies. Okay. So if it's a fire, it's going to be a fire agency. So it's going to be the incident commander from the fire side. So as soon as that first responding officer gets there, they get relieved based on who else shows up that has a higher level of training, maybe a supervisor, maybe a lieutenant, a manager. They immediately marry up, is what we call it, marry up with the fire incident commander if it's a fire. If it's a highway incident, it's going to be with the highway patrol. And they're going to get in joint unified command and make those decisions. And it's going to be based off of truly the conditions at the time. How many resources do we have right now? Are there multiple fires going out through the entire county, through the entire state? Are we limited with our resources today? Or are we the first one and we've got so many resources, we know they're coming? It's going to happen, and it's basically that conversation with that fire, the expert, the fire incident commander of how quickly do we think we can get this contained? And if they have a high belief that it's going to get contained quickly, and it's based off of, again, resources, topography, what the current weather conditions are, what the humidity level is it early in the season, is it late in the season? And they track those things every single day, probably many times during the day. So they're experts in our community on truly, if a fire happens, what do they believe it's going? How do they believe it's going to take off, or how quickly do they think they can get it contained? If they think they can get it contained, we have so many fires that happen that not a lot of people even hear about because they get them contained so fast. We have phenomenal firefighters in Nevada County across all of the different agencies. And I don't say it's because they care any more than any other firefighter in the California or across the country. It's because they live here, they know our terrain, they know how important these things are, they know the impact of an evacuation. So we don't just arbitrarily say, we're just going to evacuate. That could be the most conservative thing to do. Evacuate, we're going to be fine. But the more times you evacuate, the more times you're going to go, why did I evacuate? That wasn't necessarily worth all that time, effort, stress. We understand how much stress that causes on you. So it truly is balanced based off of current condition, the likelihood of containment, and the safety of our community. And they rely on our staff on saying, okay, how populated is the area? Is there ingress and egress issues? We have a lot of people that live at the end of a road with only one way in or out. So if those are the cases, we're going to probably be more conservative and say that person needs to get out. Whether we think we may have a good chance of getting it contained, it's the best to be able to put out an evacuation order based on how fast and how easy it is to get folks out. But we also don't want to congest every single zone and have every single person in our county evacuate at the same time, because we're going to see that traffic bottleneck.
And that's exactly where I want to go next before we kind of start talking about other agencies more. So, I've heard people say the first time they announce an evacuation zone, I'm out of here. I've heard other people say, do I go by and pick up my kids? What do I do? What are the best practices as we start to see a fire that is, we're not being asked to evacuate, or we're not on warning, and we're certainly not being told to shelter in place? What should we do?
Well, first and foremost, which is extremely difficult, but we need to stay calm. When we're out of control, we have the potential to maybe get in a traffic accident and then really bottleneck a roadway down. So it's difficult. We absolutely understand that. But going through in your mind when you're doing your preparation, sometimes your mind doesn't know the difference if it's real or not. So when you do your preparation and finding different ways to get in and out of the residence that you have, or if you move, or maybe it's a parent that you're helping and trying to find different ways in which to get into your residence. Putting your mind through that, what if it is right now an emergency and I can't see because of the smoke and the roadway, trying to get through that mind memory, muscle memory of staying calm. It's difficult, but we owe it to ourselves to prepare for that. And then if you don't feel comfortable and you're so stressed out, I say leave. When we had the Jones fire, I had a sibling, my sister got evacuated. She was in one of the ordered zones. She came to my house. My parents were kind of on the outside of the warning. They're in their 80s. I said, why don't you guys come over? Because they sat there and did I don't know what to do. So we said, come on over. So again, it's your comfort zone. Again, it's a big impact on your life to evacuate from your home. So you have to balance that with, should I go, should I not go? We tell people, if you feel that you're threatened, whether you're in the zone to ordered or warning ordered, you're going to feel better if you're not in that area. And again, sometimes that is helpful to prepare. So this is maybe not the chaos of I only have a couple minutes to get out. Maybe it does help you get your plan together and go, okay, I didn't have that in my go bag this time. I got to make sure I have that. Or I didn't know there was a different route out of this particular neighbor, or maybe they put in a new road. We have some development coming in, sometimes faster than when I drive around and go, I didn't know this road was here, but I've been driving here for a long time. So, those are the things that I know I go through with my own, shall I evacuate or not? I have a teenage daughter that's driving. Again, we talk a lot about what happens if we're not home and she's home alone. What is her job to do? And it's not to grab valuables out of the house. The valuables will go. I want that teenager to get out. So she knows she's to get into the car and get out as fast as she can in the couple of different ingresses and egresses. There are not many where I live. But again, those are the things that we go through as a family. Making sure you have that conversation, I think, is important. And with kids, sometimes they look at you like that's never going to happen until that one time they have to evacuate by themselves. And those are the discussions. What's the age you leave your child at home now? I can tell you, as a 12-year-old, 11-year-old, I was home all the time by myself. I would not leave my 10 or 11-year-old home alone in Nevada County during fire season. It's just you're not setting yourself up for success. It's difficult because we have lives, we have all those different things going on. But those are the things that living in an area that's prone to wildfire, that changes your life, right? That makes you. But having the education, having the ability to come to a forum, a speech, an outreach. Our Office of Emergency Services has been doing just a phenomenal job of trying to get out there and get the information out for folks. They're at all the fairs, the picnics, all the different things. They got a table. Sometimes it's just that person that has to come up and ask them, hey, which zone do I live in? How do I get into Code Red? How do I do this? We have an amazing coalition of Firewise communities in Nevada County. It's amazing how educated people are in getting the information and being committed to their safety, for having the peace of mind of saying, I live in a wild-prone area, but I'm going to do everything I can on my end to making sure that I know what to do when the event happens.
So and by the way, we have a lot of Firewise community members here. A lot of them have badges on, so feel free to seek them out afterwards. But so what I'm hearing you say, if I'm going to boil it down and simplify it, is plan, practice, and alter as new information comes in. Because this is a changing subject with a lot of new information, right?
Correct, and it's dynamic. And some folks will say, well, why don't you tell us exactly which road to go out when we evacuate? And again, it depends on lots of different things that are currently happening. We don't want to set up a plan that says, if you live on one certain road, every single time you go out this way. Because that one time that's where the fire is going to be. So we have to rely on the expertise of our fire incident commanders. They have all the knowledge of where their staff are, where that fire is going, how fast it's going. They'll talk with our incident commander that's in Joint Command right there with them, like literally shoulder to shoulder. Typically for the first couple of hours, it's going to be at the side of a car. because it's that fast. Then we start that platform of an incident command station where we bring out bigger vehicles and the ability to map and do certain things that help us make those decisions.
And Shannan, I've heard you say, don't call 911, so I'm going to ask you to talk about that for a minute. And then I also want you to talk about the high-low sirens, because I'm convinced, just talking to my friends, a lot of people have never heard a high-low siren, and you guys have done a lot to equip your cars and use those to help.
Yeah, do we
you,
have
so.
the ability to do a high-low here today? Maybe on a video? I'll have them work on it.
Yeah, we'll
have them work on
check.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The first part of your question was
The 911
the
centers.
911. Yeah. So the Regional Dispatch Center for Nevada County for all 911 calls comes into the center where my staff work, and there's typically, I want to say, at least 3 dispatchers in there. Sometimes maybe 2 in the evening hours. So they're the ones taking all the 911 calls, and they've done a tremendous job. Part of the 911 system for California, there's a requirement that you answer those 911 calls within a certain amount of time. And if you don't, you get in trouble. And we have always been well above the amount of time, and it's literally within seconds you have to answer the call. Now, they might answer it and then put you on hold, but they gotta answer it, right? They'll usually say, "Can you hold?" And usually when you have an emergency, you're like, why are you asking me if I can call? I called 911. No. I can't hold. But all of those phone calls go in there. So if you see something, you see smoke, you see fire, of course call it in. Those are emergencies. If you're trying to determine, was my zone evacuated? It clearly is an emergency to you, but those dispatchers are going to have to say, where do you live? What's your address? It's going to take them time while other people are reporting where the fire is. So if you have a question that's not necessarily a large emergency, we have 2 other numbers you can call. So typically we say call 211. 211 is the county's information systems, communication systems with our community. They know all the information we have, and they're able to say, what's your address? Really, nice and calmly, get your address in, pull it up under the Genesis system to see if you're in the evacuation warning, evacuation order, or maybe you're miles away, but they said McCourtney Road. How long is McCourtney Road? It's very long. Do I live on this side of McCourtney? Do I live on this? How close is that zone to me? So that's not necessarily a call that a 911 dispatcher is going to have the time to be able to sit down and have that conversation. 211, absolutely. If it's during the day, a lot of times our legal office assistants are taking those calls. So you truly do want to leave that 911 system open to clear emergencies, traffic accidents, life emergencies, so that they have the ability to get emergency services folks to that person.
So, and I think we'll get to high-low, and maybe we can cue that up in a second. But really, there are at least 2 large choke points as we think about evacuation. One is 4920, the road's out of here. And several of us in the room have probably been part of an evacuation where, traffic has come to a standstill, or we've had accidents during evacuations, that sort of thing. So I want to start out with just a question about, is it possible for the sheriff's office to do contra traffic, like to close the lane, or do you need CHP to do that? And what have you learned from the traffic jams that have taken place on 49 and 20?
Yeah, lots of lessons learned. The reality with contraflow on Highway 49 is we have so many, not just roadways, but driveways that come onto Highway 49. So if we're doing and what contraflow is instead of one lane going north and south, you say all lanes are going out, right? So that's contraflow. So we're not saying there's a northbound 49. We're saying everything's southbound. We're trying to get everybody out of there. 2 lanes of traffic going out of Highway 49, with as many different ways for people to get on Highway 49. Not going to work. Literally not going to work. We're going to have some head-on collisions. In some of the agencies, what we learned in the Camp Fire on the Skyway up there in Butte County, they were able to do that because they didn't have any addresses or residences or roadways coming onto the Skyway. So they opened up 2 lanes coming out of during that Camp Fire. The idea is if you do contraflow, how are you getting your emergency services equipment to your incident. I want those firefighters to get those big rigs in there, and all those firefighters to be able to get to the incident. So if we contraflow, it really does make a bigger nightmare, and that's the things that we've learned in some of our tabletop exercises.
And I have a really quick clarifying question. Is getting those vehicles in as big of a challenge now that we have more planes? I mean, does more planes really diminish the need to get the emergency vehicles in or not?
Nothing gets in the way of a good firefighter being on scene with the equipment and with the tools. Yeah. We're very fortunate to have the air attack base here, but again, there are layers of tools, and not one is going to be the end all be all. You need all of the layers of all those tools to be able to really mitigate something like that. When they get a hose lay around the entire incident, it takes a lot of man hours. And some of the terrain in Nevada County, just in the highway fire, up in the Tahoe National Forest and right outside the town of Washington, I was amazed at those firefighters' ability to hike down in there and really get around the containment line on that fire. It's hard work, but yeah, they have to be able to get there. Sure. Clearly, in some of the national forest, we've seen some of the smoke jumpers where they get dropped off of an airplane. Again, what a job that would be. That would be an amazing job. And then to get down in there and then get exhausted because you're fighting fire this whole time. But the part of the high-low siren is it started, I want to say, in 2019. There was some contentious issues about the high-low siren because the consumer agencies that direct what can go on a siren said you don't have the authority to put that on your sirens. We do have to follow the law when it comes to some of our equipment. So we were able to get that legislated and changed, and we were very fortunate that the Napa County Sheriff's Office started that in 2019. All of the agencies up in Nevada County have gotten on board with the high-low siren, and the high-low siren, you'll never hear that high-low anywhere else. That's because it's regulated. There's only so many, the sirens that we use are regulated, and it's actually regulated through CHP on the kind of equipment we can have on a law enforcement vehicle. So the high-low siren, it's directed. It's in the neighborhood. We hear all the time the conversation about a siren on a mountaintop. And in certain situations, I guess clearly if that community 100% said this is what we want, the problem we have with evacuations is it's not directed. So if it's on the top of Banner Mountain, you're going to get a heck of a lot of people hearing that. And there's only one thing, there's no other conversation. It's just the siren. So it works well sometimes in tsunamis because all you got to do is go to high ground, right? With a fire evacuation, with any other type of evacuation, when we're trying to direct very specific areas, it just adds more people evacuating. That might add to the bottleneck. It's going to add to folks that might not have had to evacuate, but they hear it. The high-low siren is in the police vehicle, in the deputy sheriff's vehicle. It's on the police, the fire department vehicles. It's on the highway patrol. And she's got it. So listen to this. This is a high-low siren.
For evacuations, state, regional, and local officials who made this happen now welcome you, our community members, to the team.
Your job? Know the sound and know what it means. Evacuate.
Evacuate.
Evacuate. Evacuate.
Where's the sound?
Yeah.
Evacuate.
So their voices were not high-low.
You know how many takes that took?
We'll get it for you in just a second. I do want to ask you a couple questions about. Let me do this for sirens in general. So some of us read recently that the city of Nevada City is thinking about a siren. You make really good points about why that might have its own challenges, particularly with tourists that might not know the area or whatever. Do you weigh in on that, other than to generally, in a forum like this, say, yeah, I have some concerns?
General concern. And who's going to sound the alarm, who's going to maintain the alarm, who's going to educate the community and the new people moving in, and all those things take layers. And again, it's what worked for us is that high-low siren. And we have spoken with folks that have evacuated that said they absolutely heard the high-low siren. So again, our evacuations are layered. So we're going to start with that notice, whether it's through Code Red. Hopefully we've got everybody signed up for Code Red. If you're not only do we have staff here that can help you, but I say call 211. They will absolutely walk you through how to sign up for Code Red to get notifications on your phone, on your home landline. If anybody still has an AT&T home landline, they're not putting any more new ones in, but if you got one, keep it. And also on an email. There's all those different ways in which you can get that Code Red announcement. That goes into the zones. So then we've pre-programmed our zones. Some agencies don't plan their zones. We've gone with a zone that's pre-planned so that we don't spend the time mapping out a zone. It's already mapped. The zones were created by our staff in conjunction with a partnership from our fire friends on, again, topography, the number of houses in an area, so that we could delineate very, very specifically zones. So again, we have a Know Your Zone campaign. Unfortunately, with software, they just recently were bought out, so now it's not Zone Haven, it's Genesis. And Genesis, we discovered some issues with the amount of people on Genesis during the most recent highway fire. So again, those are conversations we have after
talk about
events.
what kind of issues?
Just so many people logging in that you couldn't get it updated. It wouldn't update. You just got your blank screen. There's nothing worse than trying to find out where that fire is on your zone with this great technology and then the technology not working. So technology fails, power fails, all those different things. So again, it's a layered event. So,
and let's talk about a big failure, which is cell phones, right? Or having the towers go down. So we all know in Southern California, they've been able to successfully use these mobile cell phone towers. Does the sheriff's office have the ability to say, get a mobile tower here now? And are we set up to do that?
yeah, again, that's through that mutual aid law enforcement plan with California, our California OES. They have pre-positioned equipment throughout California so that when the call comes, it can easily be presented into a community. Two of the other things that we've done recently with our office is we've purchased what's called a SAT runner. And a SAT runner is a mobile device. It's not meant for public use for the cell towers. It's meant for our incident commanders. Because again, that communication with that incident command to our Office of Emergency Services, to our staff, to making sure that our maps are updated, that we can give that information out quickly and consistently. We have to have connection. So that SAT runner goes out with our team when we start setting up our incident command posts. And again, all of those things happen within this last 5 years because we can't speak. Maybe our radio towers, right? Everything is connected in Nevada County with whether it needs power. So all of our radio cell towers need power. So making sure that we can communicate so that we can get that information out, or again, calling OES and getting a cell phone for an entire community.
Right. So God forbid that we would lose cell phone connectivity during an emergency. But if we did, that doesn't necessarily mean that you all have lost connectivity.
Correct.
And so there's a confidence that we can build in that. And then how long does it take to get some of those portable towers here?
Depending on, again, the need and where those resources are, if they're already used. California OES, through the governor's office, has those pre-positioned.
Okay.
I think our closest one is in Butte, maybe
Butte.
Sacramento?
Folsom.
Sacramento. Folsom. See, these guys are experts. And they bring those up, as soon as we ask.
Okay.
Again.
And they would have the capacity to serve a broader community if we had towers down from power issues.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And again, those are layers. So that the first layer would be the communication through Code Red, through your ability to get on Genesis to see what your zone is. We're also talking with our media. So if your power goes out, let's make sure that during that fire season in our go bag, we have those radios that have battery power so that we can still get on the radio, so that we can still hear what the updates are for that fire. And again, It's not a perfect world, but those are the things you have to have layers so that one incident, one thing that goes wrong doesn't take out your entire plan. Whether that's a backup for our radio system, whether that's how you get your information, I think is important.
So let's go back to high-low for a minute. You know, we are very fortunate to live in such a gorgeous area, but that also means we have a lot of tourists. We have a new RV park that's opening, you know, that kind of thing. So we're almost always going to have people that have never heard a high-low. Did you have that at the most recent highway fire, and how were you able, kind of in the moment, to get to people, this siren means evacuate?
Yeah, again, it's layered. So, when we put out the high-low, we're not just driving around, we're actually getting out of our vehicles and we're knocking on doors. And we're letting folks know this is the time to leave. We are in an evacuation order. And that's where our evacuation tag program comes into place. And again, it could be controversial. Some people don't want to put a tag on their house saying, I'm not here, anybody want to come in? Welcome to my house. That's not the intent, clearly. The intent is, if you have that tag out on your driveway, especially if you have a long driveway, and you're saying you're evacuated, our staff can drive right past that and get to your neighbor, and get to the next neighbor, and then get to the next neighbor. Some people will say, I don't want to advertise. Well, okay, they'll go down your driveway, they'll knock on the door, they'll shout out and say we're in evacuation, and then they'll put on the radio that address and say no contact, right? So then we mark that. And if we have contact and people are gone, or we see the tag, we mark that. So we've really become more in the logistical aspect of confirming who we've made contact with in that chaotic time. And the only way we've been able to do that is with the assistance of our search and rescue team. So again, 120 plus volunteers. They are part of our incident command for fire. They have tremendous skill in mapping. And I think most importantly, resource deployment. So when we bring in those resources, we know where our resources are out in the field, because that's a safety concern for me, for our staff. They're able to map very specifically where each one of those units are, and they live track them so that we know exactly which houses and which neighborhoods they've been able to go to. That we hire laterals. So say you get somebody that lives down in the city, and their first week working for us, and we say, go up to Cascade Shores. I was talking to Dragonfly up there. Go up to Cascade Shores and start evacuations. And if you're not familiar with the area, you might have a hard time getting up there. So just making sure that part of that layering system with our search and rescue team, they assist us with mapping our own staff, but also mapping very specifically where we've been, who we've had contact with. If we interact with someone and they say, I have livestock, I can't get out, I have animals, I can't get out. Just this year, we started our Sheriff's Heart program, which is an animal rescue program. We have, again, with that group, 120 volunteers. So we have so many people in this community that want to help, that are experts in trailering, animal care, that can help get folks and their animals out. Because one thing we do understand is some people won't go without their animals, which I don't know as if I'd leave my animal. So having every single incident saying, okay, well, how can we do this better? And then going to staff. With the animal rescue team, I didn't have to go to staff. They came to me and said, this is what we want to do. So a tremendous amount of people that are willing to work in this community.
And we have evacuation tags over here if you want to grab some on the way out with the literature. And I know the Firewise folks know this, but the best practice on that is at the edge of your property to make it easier, recognizing that not everybody wants to do that. So you've mentioned a couple of times. Oh, do we have it? Yeah, here's the high-low siren.
Now we got it.
Situational awareness means using all of your senses during an emergency.
Eyes, nose, and ears.
There we go.
So it's high-low.
So now you know what it sounds like.
Some people have said it sounded like it's maybe from England or in Europe. It's a high-low. No one has access to being able to put that on a vehicle. So if you hear that, and we tell staff, don't use it for any other reason, right? Except for when we have evacuations so that people can hear that and know if you hear it, you're close enough to that car, you're in the order zone. You're not in the warning zone. Clearly, if you might be able to hear it faintly if you're in a warning zone. Those are the times where hopefully you can get on Genesis and see what zone you're in and which zones are being in the warning and in the order. If not, listening to the radio. I tell you, when I'm out and about in this community, if I see air operation from the Cal Fire, first thing I do is get on Ubinet. First thing, and I know a lot of people do that. Because I'll get that information, and then my staff will be at the same time letting me know we have an incident somewhere and what they're doing.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. So you've mentioned a number of times how much more we know now and how better prepared we are now than we were 5 years ago. I'm wondering if you could just take a step back for a minute and reflect on your biggest aha moments that have come from the evacuations that you've been part of in the last 5 years.
Ooh, there's many. Clearly, family that have been affected, so it's personal. Friends, I've know many in the room today, and understanding the impact of what an evacuation does for you and your family. The first thing I tell my staff when we're in those planning stages and we're doing table talk exercises and we're with our fire partners and our highway patrol and the police department agencies is I say, if you have the decision to evacuate, we give them the ability to do that because they're the one with the most knowledge of the incident at the time. If you're going to say evacuate, the next piece of paper on your to-do list is repopulation, and do that as soon as you possibly can, and don't wait. And sometimes we're more in the push for repopulation than our fire partners because they want to make sure it's safe and they want to make sure that they have the ability to get their equipment in and out, and there might be infrastructure down, there might be telephone and PG&E lines down and safety issues that are outside of whether or not the fire's right there. But my staff know biggest priority if you're going to make an evacuation is your next step is you're already starting to prepare for repopulation because we need to get you back in your homes.
That's great.
The sooner the better.
So I'm going to invite folks up to grab the portable mics because I want to turn it over to you guys for questions. But while I do that, I want to ask you, so when you think about evacuation, and obviously we've been through so much and there's so much emotion tied to them, what worry keeps you up at night in terms of evacuating Nevada County?
You know, 974 square miles, 102,000 people live here. That keeps me up at night. Definitely recognizing every incident could lead to the next bigger incident and the bigger incident and the bigger incident. But we all start with just one foot in front of the other on what do we need to do right now. Mm-hmm. So you can't look at it as how do you evacuate Nevada County. You say how do you evacuate for this particular fire, for this particular neighborhood, and does it grow? And we make those decisions, and does it grow? And that constant planning of do we have enough resources? Do I need to ask assistance from my neighboring partners in counties and police agencies? Once we make those evacuations, we want to make sure no one does anything criminal inside that evacuation zone. You've given us the trust that you've evacuated. We're going to make sure that we have staff there doing roaming patrols so that we know someone's not going to be in there doing criminal acts. So making sure that we do that one step at a time. So we don't look at it as how do you evacuate 102,000 people. Some of my neighboring counties, Kincaid Fire, they've evacuated larger areas than our entire population of county. And again, it's one zone at a time. And do you prepare for a wind-driven event, a hurricane event, a fire in a hurricane? Those are things that clearly they're happening. So how do you prepare for that? And sometimes you look at your staff and you say, well, you have to be the best trained, you have to have the best equipment. So those are the things that keep me up at night. Are we doing enough for training? Are we getting the right equipment? Do we have the right partners? And are we collaborating? Are we listening to our community on what their concerns are? Because maybe there is a concern out there that we didn't think of. So having the interactions with either the outreach at events or events like this of listening and saying, this could maybe help us be better. And looking at it as we haven't arrived yet. We're still learning. things change, and constantly wanting to improve, I think, is what drives us and what keeps me up at night.
Thank you. And I do want to open it up to you for questions. We've got portable mics on each side. My request of you is, Shannon's in a huge job, but if we could keep your questions on the subject of evacuation. I know that there are many other great topics, but I'd like to start there.
Cheryl,
So.
can we just start on that side? We only have one mic.
Oh, yes, here we
Start on
go.
that side, and then we'll go to this side.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Susan. I'm a campfire survivor, so
Thank you.
I definitely know what Skyway was like. My recommendation to you is to keep at least a half a tank, if not a full tank of gas ready, because Skyway was open, but only one way out. So it took me 4.5 hours to go 10 miles, because the other way was for vehicles to try to evacuate people in nursing homes and the hospital.
Yeah.
And I had just been there one day overnight after having moved from Oregon. Got there
wow.
at 7 o'clock at night and the fire hit at 8 in the morning. There was no cell phone service, there was no electricity, there were no sirens. So had it not been for my neighbor knocking on my door, I would have been burned alive because the fire hit at such an early time in the morning. I was sound asleep, I was exhausted. So, but the people who did lose gas, run out of gas, they had dozers that pushed them over to the side of the road. And in that case, they had two choices. They could either run into the fire, which was on both sides of the road by that time, and we'd see people running into the fire, you know, there'd be a slight break and we don't know if they ever lived or not, or they could run into somebody's car. Most of our cars were already full of people who had cars that had run out of gas. So it's really important that you count on having a full tank, because it could take you forever to get out on Highway 20 or Highway 49, because everything comes to basically a stop.
Thank you.
So, and if you want to see what it was like, Netflix has, I think it's called Fire in Paradise.
Yes.
That there were several documentaries about people that actually went through it, and it was very accurate because I watched it.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that tip on gas too. I believe it was the Lobo fire that the gas stations were closed as
All the
well.
gas stations were closed.
And so that's a really fantastic tip, and we're glad you're here.
Someone else on this side?
Remind me real quick though, was that day a red flag day?
I'm not sure what that means.
Okay, that's great. Red flag day is a day that the fire agencies will determine based on wind, humidity, potential for a fire to be wind driven. They'll say this is a red flag day. And we put red flags at all the fire stations. We put them in front of the Root Center. We try to get that message out. Since this has been a heavy rain season, we haven't had a red flag day yet, I believe, in Nevada County. Maybe one red flag day. So what does that red flag mean? It means let's be on our very much top game of making sure that we have full tanks of gas, that we park our vehicle pointed out, that we maybe leave our garage doors open. So if we do lose power, we're not trying to struggle with how to get that door up. And having the go bag already in the car. Maybe having the animals from the back pasture, move them up to the front pasture. Maybe making sure that your dogs and your cats, that you have kennels and everything ready. Those are the things that you do on a red flag day to making sure that if the notice comes, you're prepared, and thank goodness you were prepared and you got
I
out.
think there wasn't a red flag day. That was a big, huge issue.
Yeah.
Because it was 70-mile-an-hour winds, but it went up the canyon, and
Yeah.
the flames were 700 feet tall, so it was a fire NATO.
Yeah.
And I talked to the fire chief after the fact, a friend of a friend, and he said they were told not to put water on anything. Their whole goal was evacuation.
So I'm so sorry to do this, but I'm going to keep us moving because we only have about 5 minutes till the end, and so I want to get more in if I can. Was there another question here?
Yes, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, just completed a comprehensive after-study of the Camp Fire. And one of their conclusions was evacuation is not the universal solution. Designated safety zones are very important because you cannot get an entire town evacuated in an area like ours. Are we looking at designated safety zones yet in this county?
Yeah, I will say yes, we are. And again, that's a conversation with our fire partners on the where and making sure that we understand what those zones mean. That it might not be where you go when you have time. It's a last resort. And making sure that people don't just congregate there because they'll get flooded with too many people. And it's not the safe zone necessarily. It's everything's gone, and it's the worst of the worst, and that might be the last resort place to go. And that takes a lot of education and different things. But again, those conversations are being had, and I think the teams are listening to that study, and again, trying to constantly look at ways we can improve.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Next question
thank you.
up here at the top.
Yeah, is there a way for limited mobility residents to register or have information on the map other than just community, like neighbors knowing?
Yeah, there's a whole piece to assisted limited mobility. I know we've worked in conjunction, and I'm losing the names of the folks that we worked with. I know it was with Freed that designated locations. But again, when we know we have potentially less time because of the need for extra time to get out, those are the times where we have to look at warnings and go, maybe the warning is when I leave because I don't have the time. And I know with the Office of Emergency Services, I was just speaking with our director, part of Health and Human Services has a position with the medical area operational director that talks with folks that are pre-designated that want to come in and have those conversations. So I would definitely either get on the OES website, get on the Ready Nevada County. I would, before you leave, talk with one of the staff here and get the information so that we can assist you.
And I just want to say, because of time, we couldn't get to issues like evacuating the jails and the hospitals and the homeless and that sort of thing. But that is all part of this situational planning that's been discussed. Okay, we have another question here.
Yeah, if you get an alert and you have more than one direction to leave your house, you may not know which way to go. So you mentioned earlier that KBO and KBMR are going to be online. I mean, they're going to be broadcasting information, and that would be helpful to have a radio station you can be listening to while you're getting your animals, while you're getting your, ready to evacuate. Are they going to be able to tell us where the fire is, which way to go in an evacuation?
Yeah, we're going to try and keep them updated as best we can. We didn't talk about the role of the highway patrol during evacuations, and they initially respond just like our staff do, and they try to get as many staff as they can come up for mutual aid so that we have enough staff in those intersections so that we can direct people. Again, it's not perfect. We're gonna do the best we can. I would say the technology today of knowing exactly where the fire is better than any fires that I worked throughout my career. We used to kind of have just a general area, but we wouldn't really know exactly where that fire was. Now, with the technology, with a lot of the aircraft that are mapping for us exactly where it is, we're able to put out better information, current information, valid information for our staff on where to put traffic control points, where we're not going to let staff back, or we're not going to let community members back in. We're just going to let the flow come out. And then those CHP officers, highway patrol, deputy sheriffs, police officers, anybody that we have, we're giving them the direction on this is where the fire is and this is the way to tell people where to go. Again, it's not perfect, but it's constantly evolving on how we can get that message out.
I'm going to take one last question, and Shannan has agreed to stick around afterwards because we're coming up on time. So last question from you.
Thank you. My question is about the roads. And we live off the 174 between Perrydale and Chicago Park. So you can either go one way or the other. But, we have also looked at the library, when the library was doing something to help, where they showed us alternative routes off the 174. We tried one, and it's like, it was a dirt trail, basically, is what it was. So is there anything going to be done about helping to create more safe roads for us to exit?
Yeah, and I had that discussion also with the gentleman. The Public Works, our county development agency director, I think that's the name of Tricia. She handles all of the public roads in Nevada County. And if I remember right, we have around 560 public roads in Nevada County and about 1,500 private roads, which we have a lot of private roads in Nevada County. So neighbor to neighbor, maybe a homeowners association looking at your private roadways for making sure that the hazardous vegetation management is done properly on that roadway. Tricia's team has, based on within these last few years, just a tremendous amount of grants that they've been getting, is trying to make sure that we maintain those roads better than we have. And usually it was a 10-year cycle to doing that vegetation management. Now she's got it on a 7-year cycle, because as soon as you cut it down, it grows right back, and it usually grows better because there's more sunlight. It's lovely. But again, that's that Firewise Coalition, the groups, the neighbor to neighbor. When I think of Nevada County, I think of the safety that I feel living here. But I understand I come with 33 years of law enforcement experience. I'm going to feel safe in my community. But the safety of your community is about having a conversation with your neighbor and trusting your neighbor for maybe giving you a phone call when you need it and letting you know. I got the notice. I'm going to check my 5. I'm going to check my neighbors and making sure that they get the notice so that we can all get out, especially if I know someone has an access issue or lots of livestock or different things. But those are conversations that we have when we're not in an emergency, so that it's not, the fire's coming and what's your name again? We train that way with our fire partners. We have to know each other. So we train tremendously throughout the year because those relationships absolutely matter. But the roadways, having those discussions with our community development agency, our Office of Emergency Services, our director's here. Craig Griesbach, raise your hand. Craig's our director at OES. If you have questions about that and about the plans for maybe developing some of those things. I know someone asked about ingress and egress, and I live on an end of the road. Can we build a road that goes through and all those things? That's not under the direction of my office. I wish I had a wand and I can do some of those things. I have influence with those folks because we do talk about what's the safest thing for Nevada County. But again, those are through that public works, whether it's a private road, county road, or maybe the state highway where it would be a Caltrans issue.
And I want to give a big plug to the Firewise communities that are here and those of you who have participated in it, because there's been a lot of good work done and a lot more to do. So as we come to an end, I want to invite you all to come back September 22nd when we have our next forum event. Our conversation will be with Scott Neely, Dr. Neely, who's the head of the hospital, and we'll be talking about rural health care and hospital issues in our area. So I think that'll be just fascinating. I hope you put your name on the email so we can get you an invitation. I want to thank my colleagues on the steering committee who, if I can get you to just very quickly raise your hand and say thank you for helping put this together. And I want to end in a way that's becoming our tradition for the forum, and that is with recognition that we do live in a great community and we know our neighbors. So I want to end with one kind of know your neighbor question for Shannan, and that is, as I said to her privately, she's been here for a number of years, so many of you do know her. But what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given? Yeah, or perhaps that you like to give.
Ooh. Yeah.
Don't come to events like this. No, I'm kidding.
No. Have more events like this,
Have
actually.
more events.
Get the information out. When I ran that first campaign to become the sheriff, I really didn't have any idea what I was doing. I knew I had a passion to want to do things better for Nevada County. But I think one of the advice that a good friend said is, don't change your decisions, or don't change for thinking that you're going to change someone's mind and make them want to vote for you. Just be who you are. If they vote for you, they vote for you. If they don't, they don't. Not everybody's going to vote for you. I'm not going to please everybody. Sometimes I try, but at the end of the day, you go, well, I didn't do that one so good. But just, be yourself, and I'm pretty committed to wanting to make sure that we're all safe here in Nevada County, and hopefully that comes through with the priorities that we set for our office and making sure that we provide the education. The rest of my staff are here, so please ask questions if you have a very specific one that we can help you out with, so that you arm yourself with as much information as you can to keep yourself safe.
Help me thank Sheriff Moon.